Dear scientists and participants, it is great to meet finally face to face. I will briefly address the human rights aspects of climate change from the point of view of Sápmi. My presentation will be focused on our recent research project concerning the sociocultural effects of climate change to Sápmi people. The research materials, fieldwork and workshop. Sápmi have been of great interest for researchers for a long time. They have served as informants, drivers, guides, translators and cooks for the researchers. This role is not enough for the Sápmi. They do not want to be treated as resources, but equals. Sápmi have found out that research can influence public image, legislation and administration. So for Sápmi, research is not indifferent, but can be means to affect climate policies and for the future of their culture. Sociocultural aspects of climate change requires discussion also between the scientists and indigenous people. How research can advance sociocultural justice and cultural sustainable climate adaptation. Sápmi people have become more aware on their rights, and it is crucial to understand that research among indigenous people cannot be done anymore by aiming only to advance science or research's own career. In times of climate change, common good must be considered. Sápmi have been adapting to series of changes during history. Language laws, assimilation policies, and adaptation to Finnish society and global challenges has not been a simple process. And many traditions, knowledge, and even livelihoods were lost in process. One of the results was segregation of Sápmi society and the rise of idols and values of majority society within the Sápmi society. Sápmi have already faced a set of challenges to solve, and climate change has added another, severe challenge to the whole future of Sápmi people. Concept of justice has to be understood in context. Climate agreements, European Union and national policies provide context as well as human rights treaties. What the question is, will Sápmi needs be included in these aims and agreements, or does Sápmi have to adapt once again to meet the needs of the majority? Human rights aspects has been included in one way or another in climate policies. It's regarded important, but what does it mean in practice? How people from other culture understand and interpret concept of human rights? I know that Sápmi understand the concept of human rights differently from majority society. They regard that Sápmi have the right to maintain their culture, language, livelihoods, and way of life according to Sápmi traditions. The view of majority is that this has to be done in framework, legal and administrative setting laid down by the state and as part of global world. The majority decides the limits and possibilities for adaptation. This also concerns climate adaptation. When conducting fieldworks, Sápmi were extremely concerned on the tertiary effects of climate change to their environment. They fear that they have to pay the price for climate mitigation by giving up pasture, resources and livelihoods for common global good, for wind farms, for example. So the question is, whose justice is more important and how decides what is equal? In the governmental panel of climate changes, the cultural and social effects of climate change have been acknowledged, but in Finland this has not been the case. Discussion has been only on general level. It is easy to say that climate change has human rights effects, but how can these effects be understood at the national, regional, or cultural level, and how these effects can be minimized? In Finland, most of discussion concerning climate change concerns climate mitigation. But for Sápmi, the question of climate adaptation is already everyday life. Currently, Sápmi culture has not been considered in climate work, resulting poor governance. In our previous project, we have proposed the establishment of Sápmi panel of climate change that would include scientists and holders of traditional knowledge to address issues on climate mitigation and adaptation from the perspective of Sápmi and Sápmi. It seems that this proposal will be implemented in Climate Act. It is proposed that a Sápmi Climate Council to be established. It remains to be seen will the Finnish society give resources and sufficient task to this organ to meet the challenges. Sápmi have been adapting for the effects of climate change for one generation. New traditions and knowledge have emerged, but similarly traditions and knowledge has been lost. The adaptation process has been rapid and reaction to prevailing conditions with the help of their traditional knowledge. The greatest environmental challenge facing reindeer herders is the uncertainty and unpredictability of new conditions. Reindeer herders do not know yet are their chosen adaptation method correct for their livelihood and culture in the long run. One of my informants said that we have been adapting for a long time. Soon it will not be Sápmi reindeer herding anymore if the changes continue. That change is a pretty radical thing that is going on all the time. Most of interviewed herders have raised a serious concern on the future of Sápmi reindeer culture, but some have highlighted that changes in reindeer work are part of natural development, and lost traditions are a natural part of this development. Climate change adaptation is a process of cultural change in response to change in the environment and society. So the adaptation has to be done in a culturally sustainable way. Sápmi need to effect climate adaptation and find solution in collaboration with the researchers and the state. We need to have discussion on how adaptation does not equal cultural and language laws. This slide is a draft of one of research of Sociocultural project. It is an adaptation from our research term theoretical analysis of holistic effects of climate change to Sápmi people. We have applied the effects of climate change into the primary, secondary, and tertiary effects. The primary effects arise from the direct change and impacts of the physical system. The secondary effects arise due to ecosystem-wide changes. The tertiary effects refer to wider scale of effects caused by intersection of climate, politics, and ecology, both human and non-human. We have applied this division to social and cultural effects of climate change. As we can see from the slide, the tertiary effects, or one could say the intergenerational effects, are most extensive. Our research data shows that climate adaptation has been happening in Sami reindeer herding for 20 years. So the cultural effects are clearly visible. We can observe many patterns of causal effects of climate change. Changes in the winter conditions have led to supplementary feeding of reindeer in most areas. This has changed reindeer diet and role of the herder and reindeer. Reindeer behavior has changed due to feeding. As a result, traditional knowledge and language changes and causal process from primary to tertiary effect is clear. Food security is one of the concerns for the Sami as well in the times of climate change. A concrete example is balsa mires that are melting or have already melted in Finnish Sápmi. Reindeer prefer balsa mires because it provides rich nutrition. When balsa mires melt, also the nutritional resource is lost, and this has adverse effects to the reindeer health and nutrition. Cloudberry, most important berry for the Sami, prefers balsa mires as habitat. Sami have reported that cloudberries have disappeared from dried balsa mires. The traditional Sami way of life and nutrition has protected Sami from Western lifestyle diseases. Unfortunately, there is evidence that the lifestyle is changing. Sami experience less physical activity and traditional diet is especially outside Sami core areas, being partly or completely replaced with Western diet. The main reason for the lifestyle change is that fewer Sami can occupy themselves in traditional Sami livelihoods. Most of the Sami have to find employment elsewhere. Reason for this are the societal pressures from the major society and also climate change. A crucial question for the future of the Sami is how the communities can adapt to climate change in a culturally sustainable way, mitigate the risks and losses brought by climate change, and ultimately, how society at large can support the adaptation. Climate change adaptation is balancing between cultural tradition and values, administration, legislation, sufficient income, and increasing pressures and stress. Sami do not simply follow the change, but try to adapt their reindeer work to changed circumstances and conditions. Communities have made different kinds of choices to maintain their livelihood. One of my informants highlighted the change very well. Climate change is a great threat to reindeer Sami culture because it is the reason why young people are hesitant to start reindeer herding. They fear the effects and the future. If they don't start, then our reindeer herding culture will disappear. So the question is how society can help Sámi to adapt. Our research team has concluded that this challenge can be met by systematic monitoring of primary, secondary, and tertiary effects of climate change and collaboration between Sámi researchers and the society. But this work requires resources and new kind of thinking from the whole society. We need better climate policy that support, not hamper vulnerable cultures. Thank you all for interest.
Thank you, Klemetti. Does anyone have one question maybe before we go forward? It's okay. Yes, please.
Okay, so Sámi people has many times presented as a very homogeneous group of people. However, as among every population group, there is a different kind of opinions according to the age or gender or whatsoever. And if we look at the Sámi people, so we can see that several different groups which differ in livelihoods, culture, even languages. So can you see this diversity in the attitudes of Sámi people towards climate change and adaptation?
Thanks for the question. I think that I will give Sovio a chance to answer the questions. She belongs to our research group and perhaps she has a little better English than us.
Okay.
Than me.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Our research material consists of reindeer herders. We have interviewed 72 reindeer herders, but many of them also are occupied in handicrafts, fishing, and tourism services. And also some of them are even teachers, because not every Sámi can be a full-time worker in Sámi traditional livelihoods. And we also have a workshop material gathered here in Finnish Sápmi. We had 6 workshops last year. But different kind of attitudes do exist, that is a fact, but it hasn't been our research question. But also there are different kind of attitudes towards climate change in different regions. For example, in Utsjoki region, many reindeer herders consider that climate change, in fact, creates also possibilities because reindeer have more nutrition because winter comes on later on, and the carcass weight of the reindeers has actually increased. They are bigger, the calves in the autumn, and this is a joint effect of supplementary feeding and also climate change. But not in, well, for example, in Käsivarsi region or in Enontekiö or Inari region, the views are somewhat different. Currently, winter conditions are quite challenging here in Sámi, everywhere in the Sámi. The reindeer herders have reported, for example, in the Inari region, that reindeers have went to them in Inari area. They also feed on the islands. Reindeers have gone to the islands, but herders cannot track them or go after them because of thin ice. So perhaps they can see the reindeers in January if there's enough ice. So the regional differences are there, and we have tried to address them in the Sámi report that is available in internet. Thank you. I hope I managed to answer your question.
Any other questions? Oh, Sirpa, please.
So how much there is collaboration between like Finnish, Norwegian, Swedish Sámi communities, for example, in climate change adaptation?
Currently, the work is conducted by the International Center of Reindeer Husbandry that is located in Kautokeino. And we had a Nordforks project on the matter, and hopefully we will get to implement it also in Sweden. Now it's been implemented in Finland and Russia. But the cooperation has been somewhat different. For example, in Sweden there is an extensive work on climate adaptation. There has been many projects to prepare a climate adaptation plan for the single reindeer herding community. And this process is ongoing. But in Norway, the process is quite slow. There hasn't been that much of an effort yet. And in Finland, I think this work is starting. And the Sápmi parliaments, of course, have a crucial role on the matter. And the cooperative organ of the Sápmi parliaments, the Sápmi Parliamentary Council. And we also had an idea of having a joint workshops between the Swedish, Norwegian, Russian reindeer herders, but we had this COVID crisis, and it changed the research setting for us, and of course, I think for everybody else that we're going to do research. So hopefully that is something that we could do in the future if we get funding. That is, of course, always a crucial question for us. Thank you.